Hello, good evening, good morning, all. Thanks for joining this call. So, welcome to this session. Today's session is about Kiro, which is an IDE, which is the AI-driven based IDE, which will be supported by AWS majorly. So today we will be going to discuss more on Kiro, like how it helps us in development or platform engineering tasks, and how it will be useful and what all features the Kiro is providing right now compared to the rest of the other IDEs, what's currently in the market, and what exactly the beneficial things what Kiro is providing us, right? So that's something we are going to be discussing today in this session. So, hi, my name is Kapil Gohel. I'm just co-host for this session, and I have an known co-host, which is being part of this session most of the time. That is Amit D'Souza. Hey, Amit,
Hey, couple.
how are you?
I'm good. It's great to finally do a session on Kiro. It's
Right,
just been released, I think, late last week.
right.
I've just started using it late last week at least, and it's been fun little time playing around with it and seeing how it works compared to all the other IDEs out there.
Right. And it is so trending that after launching, right? So it's so it got so fast trending with because the users started using it, right? So even I don't think so. The Kiro is expected that this number of count which is going to be using it as per the with using this new features and everything, right? So I think it is very trending. So that's the reason I think we should have a discussion or a topic on this Kiro, that what currently, why the market is moving ahead with the Kiro, what exactly the beneficial things what Kiro is providing to a platform engineer or a developer. So that way, everyone will be aware that what's Kiro it's about and how it will benefit them while performing any platform engineering task or a development task, right? And how it will be benefit them. Yeah. So I think we should uh, cut down the introduction part, and I think we should start with the Kiro thing so that it will be more helpful to them. Yeah.
Absolutely. One of the main reasons I found Kiro different compared to Cursor and VS Code and all the other tools out there, Windsurf, now you have so many IDEs, is because of spec-driven development. It changed the way people can use AI, and it made it more uh, it keeps a proper record and context of what changes you're making during the lifetime of using the application, which is really helpful in the long run when you are trying to understand what's going on, especially if you have multiple developers who are basically going to be using your system. You want to definitely understand, hey, okay, couple made changes ABC, this is why he made these changes, and this is how he made these changes, and so on and so forth. So this is completely towards spec driven development. So you provide your code base with certain specs. So I've made a small little diagram here to give a decent idea about how things work, and how it goes from year to the next phase and how the whole flow works. So you basically, once you set up your repository, you set up steering files. Steering files are generated. So if it's an already existing repository, you can generate steering files which will generate different details about your repository. So whether it's code conventions, whether it's certain policies about your what your code base should follow, what are the principles they should follow. And if it is an already existing repository, it will generate it based on how you have currently set up your repository. The next bit is spec generation. So spec generation is normally when you are making changes for, say, if you're using Cursor or VS Code, and you want a certain new feature to be implemented within either your code or whether it is Terraform, whether it is Python scripts, whatever it is, you'll say, can you update the code to perform this particular action? So whether if in Terraform you want an additional cluster, you'll say, can you update the Terraform code to provide us with another cluster in Sydney region, etc. So you'll give certain details. Based on those details, it will then go and directly give you the code, which is fantastic. But there is a limitation on that. It's you don't have any record of how you reach there. The next developer who takes over your task also doesn't have a record of how it reached there. They don't have any understanding of what were the different specs that were used for this purpose, what was the requirement. So what were the requirements you approved or you thought was useful, and what tasks were created out of it, and what was the design. So Kiro simplifies this by creating specific requirements, tasks, and design. So first it'll basically say this is the task that you're trying to accomplish, this is the spec. This, based on that, it will generate a certain uh, design, and once the design is done, then it'll generate the tasks so that it goes in that specific order, and once it completes that whole thing, then you can basically have your entire infrastructure or code, or take a pick. And last and finally, you have certain agent hooks where what you do is every time you make certain code changes, you can perform certain actions. So here you can see there's a documentation hook. So you can say anytime the code changes, ensure that the documentation is up to date. So you know how normally you might have to go and review the documentation and ensure that it's updated every time the code is updated. Cursor might not necessarily realize that, neither will VS Code necessarily realize it needs to update the documentation. But in this case, what you are basically doing with Kiro is creating these beautiful guardrails and this automation in place. So exactly how DevOps works, right? So what does DevOps do? We try and create self-service requests and ensure that developers can request for infrastructure themselves without having to necessarily create a ticket, come to us. It would just generally be self-service where, oh, okay, you can self-provision yourself a new project within AWS or GCP or Azure or whatever, and you'll get a new cluster. And these are the guardrails we are applying. So similarly, agent hooks and your spec documents and all are kind of like guardrails which you're creating for all your coding, um, AI coding or AI assisted coding, potentially even your vibe coding. So even if you don't necessarily understand the language, in certain cases, if say a product manager wants to perform a quick little test, he wants to or she wants to verify, does this new I want this new feature within the product, would this work? So let's go and test it out, let's do a quick POC. So they themselves would be potentially be able to actively get involved in the whole process of performing a quick little POC on their setup, verify, okay, everything works, this looks good. Now, once that is validated, they can then pass it to the devs and be like, hey, I want a proper implementation of this based on a high level validation. I think this is what we want, and this looks good according to us. Um, so that's where your entire spec coding is concerned. And your steering documents are in order to ensure that your whole team is following certain best practices and best policies. You can have custom steering documents or whatever is generated by Kiro itself. So without wasting too much more time, we'll just jump into an example.
Sure. Yep. So before that, I have just one question that, so like as you said, right, the few pointers like hook, steering, spec driven, right? So how it is, so these are the key features of Kiro, right? But how it is differencing from the currently the AI based ID which is there, like Cursor, Copilot, or VS Code, which has an AI. plugins, right, available. Then how it is differentiate and having the more visibility comparing with them, right? So why? What is the difference?
That's a fantastic question, Kapil. And I think one of the main reasons why this is different is what we do with Cursor or VS Code, etc., is more of vibe coding
Mm-hmm.
rather than spec coding. And what does vibe coding mean is, uh, so you basically, even if you know what you want, you are basically checking the final output of what your AI code is giving. So you say, these are the changes I want, these are certain guidelines you need to follow, and please provide me the code for it. When you do that, your respective Cursor or VS Code or like Claude code will generate certain files and code, and will basically provide you all whatever is required. But when you perform all those actions, you do not know under what circumstances, say, I made those requests. What were
Mm-hmm.
the tasks which I performed in order to fix any of those requests? Were there any changes done, and why were those changes done? So none of that is recorded anywhere, and no one will ever know how I ended up with the solution I ended up with.
Got
You might discuss it. So best practice would be, even after doing all of this in a development team, you come together, you discuss why you developed your solution in the PR, potentially prior to even starting out your conquest of performing all these development. You would already have a conversation within your dev team saying that this is what I'm planning to do, this is how I'm approximately planning to do it, and this is the architecture I'm trying to follow. So if everybody is on a consensus, you will begin your work. Now, on the other hand, you have spec coding, right? So spec coding means you first are planning, and then only once your plan is complete, then it will start generating the code for you, if you are happy
it.
with whatever specs it has generated. So in this particular case, we are currently using KubeCon, a demo I used at KubeCon, China this time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I can show you what I mean directly on this, and that should kind of work as the best example.
Got it. So you
So
mean to say, like, if the other ID is something, it's not getting recorded, what exactly the background process is, something we are doing.
absolutely,
However, here you will get the complete details, right? What all changes it's been assigned, or they have asked us, recommended to fix those things. So that way it will helpful. Even it has been recorded, so that way we can go back and identify that what they have suggested and what we have implemented right now because of this thing, right? So that way we
absolutely,
will track down the things. Yeah, got it. Thanks.
absolutely.
That
And
helps.
not just that, right? It's even the part where not just the records, but as you can see, you are first planning, you
Hmm.
verify that you're happy with whatever plan is generated, only then will you start building. Versus
Right,
in vibe coding or Cursor or VS Code, you directly start generating code. There is no place
right,
where you evaluate what is your respective Cursor or Claude code or any of your whichever AI tool you're
got
using
it.
is going
Hmm.
to actually generate. It does not really give you an advance notice. It just gets
Right, right,
generated. So that's a major difference. It's like, think about the same reason why you potentially run a build and see the output of a Helm template build, where you see the output of Helm template build prior to you going ahead and just deploying it in production, right?
got it.
So think
So
of it
this,
a bit like that.
right. So this we can, it is good to say, right, using Kiro, we can write down the code which is eligible to for the production deployment as well, rather than comparing to the cursor or an other IDs. It's bit tricky to confirm that whether it is going to be there in the production or not, because we don't have that proper details that what all the changes has been implemented. Rather than that, here, can we say it that way, or will it
No,
that
I
help?
wouldn't. I wouldn't say any code should directly be deployed to production, which
Yep.
is just generated. And I don't even mean generated. Like, even if a developer intentionally has written code, I never ever would say put it directly in production. It is a lot more mature way of designing your code, where you are first making a plan and only then building. So think of it
Right.
like building blocks, right? When you go and build your house, you don't just start building your house. You don't just start putting, oh, I'm just going to start laying brick over brick over brick and start building, and then I will decide how to go and how many rooms I want. You first start designing with the architect saying that, okay, I want a 3 bedroom house. Okay, how big do you want each of your rooms? Where should your room go? So all of this is pre-decided. This is how you start building your house. You first
Right.
design, you plan about it, you design it, and only then you start building. So think of it in a similar way we are using Kiro, where you first are see the whole plan of how it is planning to build it. It uses user stories in order to build it, and I'll show you an example of each of these when we start. And the best way to understand it is when I show you. So taking an example of this repository, I had done a demo for Crossplane versus Crow versus OpenTofu versus Pulumi in order to deploy a static site, right? Now, within this code, you have a README, but you do not have anywhere within this setup. You don't have any documents mentioning any practices that are being followed within the setup, etc. So the first thing you'll do is click on Kiro
Right. Mm-hmm.
and click on Generate Steering Doc. So this ensures that the agent behavior always follows these best practices by doing that. And here you can see it is reading all the readme.mds. Once it goes through all the readme.mds, once it goes through all the code, it will then generate the steering docs. So here you can see it's generated first the product doc. It's basically
Mm-hmm.
saying what is the intention of this repository. Then it mentions what is the tech used within this repository and certain
Mm-hmm.
practices. And then it's also going to show you the structure within this. So as you can see that it's gradually getting generated. It's mentioning what to perform during these various actions, how to run these various tools, what are the environment variables that are potentially required for your entire system. So you can see like how concise and precise is this? It's telling you exactly it's using OpenTofu, it's using Pulumi, this is the CLI, these are the providers being used, this is the state where it is stored, the language is so and so. Similarly, it does it for Pulumi, similarly, it does it for Crossplane, and so on and so forth. It is very handy to see that all of this information is consolidated within one document. So it's already mentioned certain practices and certain documents which the agent needs to review prior to going and starting to update code. So what Kiro agent will do is it will always ensure that it reviews this before it starts writing any new code. So it
Got it.
checks
So
what's your
this will
product
be
functionality.
got it. Uh, so this will be something your baseline, right? I would say in that way
Yes.
that it has been
So
created for you. Mm-hmm.
it's your baseline, and more specifically it's your steering documents. What the
Right.
steering documents is exactly like your car. It decides what direction you go. So if you turn the
Mm-hmm.
steering wheel left, it goes left. If you turn the steering wheel right, it goes right. But you can only go in the directions where your steering wheel is going to take you, right? You can't go
Right.
upwards in a car, for example. So the steering wheel either can go left, right, or straight. So this is basically created a documentation where your agent has to first review this documentation, and based on this documentation, then take any further actions.
Got it. So these are something the documents where through which the agents will refer it and accordingly they will generate a spec on what it is there. So is there any possibilities that steering documents will get changed in some scenarios? Then depend upon
Yes,
then the agents will get have the different specs been created for that.
absolutely. Not just the steering documents get changed. You can add your custom documents. So if
Got
you
it.
have
Okay.
certain practices which you want to always follow,
Hmm.
certain best practices your whole team follows, you will add that under the steering documents. Certain
Okay.
coding practices, you always want to follow certain camel coding within your variables. Like anything that you follow, mention it within the steering doc and post that the agent will take, always ensure it follows that.
Got it. Okay, great.
And last and finally, you have the structure document, which is basically saying this is the structure we want to follow within the repository. So long story short is any further code that it generates, it will try and follow the structure. Okay.
Okay.
So that is the first bit, right? Like that is the initial part of the agent steering of what the steering documents does. Now, what
Right.
happens with this? This generates a .kiro folder within your repository. It creates the steering document, and now you have this new document. Why is this handy? Because this is going to go back into Git. What does this mean is your next developer who picks this up has all of these details. They are not flying blind.
Okay.
So
Mm-hmm.
in the current situation, when I write code and I pass it to you, you don't necessarily have any specific documentation which guides cursor. Like there are certain things which you can do within cursor, and you can create certain guidelines, but there's no specific steering documents or a spec based document which you perform your actions with. Versus here you explicitly have all of these details once
Got
you
it.
finish this.
Right.
So now comes the next bit, right? What is spec driven development? So this is spec, and currently my code is performing a certain action, right? It's creating a static site using Crow, OpenTofu, Pulumi and Crossplane. So let's say we now want any additional code, right? We want code for AWS CDK to deploy a static website. And in order to do that, how do we basically perform that action, right? So we'll go into Kiro. You then click on specs. Now you mention, I want to now also show an example of deploying a static site using AWS CDK. Use Python and create the same infrastructure that the other IAC tools were using to create a static site. So this I've given it a high level what I'm trying to achieve or what I want to reach. And then I press enter.
Mm-hmm.
So once I press enter, what it does, first, it goes through the steering documents. Why is the steering documents important? It's important because it wants to validate what was the practices which our team is following for this
Got it.
repository.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It finishes doing that. Second task it does, it generates a requirements document. What does the requirements document do? It says exactly what I said in one sentence, but with a lot more details. What is the requirement? This feature adds AWS CDK using Python as a fifth infrastructure. It already realized it's one more infrastructure as code to an option
Mm-hmm.
to existing multi-IAC static site deployment project. It then says the AWS CDK implementation will deploy the same static site. It says how it's doing it, etc. That is the high-level introduction. It then says user stories. So this is how a product manager would understand what is being done, what are the certain acceptance criteria. So it is similar to a Jira ticket. You can basically use all of these details when you create your Jira ticket, leveraging
Mm-hmm.
something like your Atlassian MCP tool. Sorry about that. You can then use your requirements and acceptance criteria, etc., in order to generate Jira tickets or one or more Jira tickets. And you can leverage something like Atlassian or Linear in order to then go ahead and update these details within that setup. Now, why is this useful? So this is useful because see, it said what it did. It has created the requirements documents for performing this. What is the core functionality? What is the project structure? What is the infrastructure equivalency? So here you can see after that it does integration, authentication, documentation, and so on. So it's performing
Right.
all of these actions, not just one of them. Here it not only says what is requirements one, this is the user story. As a developer, this is what you want to do. What is the acceptance criteria of it? Then it mentions requirement number 2, how it basically follows the same project pattern as other ISC tools so that it's easy to navigate the code base. It understood that. It creates an acceptance criteria for that. Third, I want to AWS CDK deployment to create equivalent infrastructure to the GCP implementations so that I can see how the same outcome is achieved across different cloud providers. So it also understood that all my other ISC was done on GCP. Now it's going to create the AWS equivalent. It then created acceptance criteria of that. Then it created fourth requirement. I want the AWS CDK implementation to integrate the existing deployment script. So how it is deploying the static site, the actual code of the static site, so that I can use the same unified interface as other tools. So I had a shell script which deploys the static site. It was ensuring that it performed all of those actions. Now, it covered all of these details. It went through my whole project. It understood all of these requirements and it created in a very well-defined manner. Now, imagine if you did this in Cursor, you would not have all of these details.
Yes.
You would just get the
Agree.
result and you would not be completely sure that what requirements did it follow. Would you be sure? No. You would just
No.
see what it mentioned out here. On a high level, you would understand this. So while on the right hand side, it mentions these 5-6 items, you don't completely understand what was the logic it went through while doing this. On the other hand, in Kiro, you can see exactly what were the requirements, what is the acceptance criteria it has created for each of your 6 items.
Understood.
Do you know exactly what it's doing? So it's a lot more well defined. So this is what it means by spec driven development. It created the specs, it created the requirements. First phase done, requirements created. Now is the next phase, design. So now you click on move to design phase. Once you click that, it then goes into the design phase. And then generate the design. So here it is generating the design based on whatever requirements I'm happy with. Don't forget, you can actually add to these requirements. So if you're not happy with the acceptance criteria, you can add number 5, add an acceptance criteria that you wanted to follow within your respective setup. And that's completely fine. It'll work. So now let's wait for the design documents to get generated.
So in that case, you are so this will also help across the developer who are working on the same project, right? So in Cursor, I think every individuals are having the different content or an through which they are creating a developing code. Rather here, every developer across the developer who are working on the same project have the same contents while using an AI. So that way at least will generate the similar set of code which will be accepted for complete for that project, I guess. So that helps. Yeah, that's something.
Absolutely. Like Cursor does have some config which you can put in which transcends a repository, but it's not at this level. It does not provide these level details. And when I say these level details, this is not only this one task. You have to remember, this is a change request. A change request has a lot of details, which after a developer completes it, no one really knows what all was implemented, how it was implemented, when it was implemented, etc. Like it is the same reason why you have bugs which were fixed and then they come back into the code like 5 months, 6 months down the line. You have the same bug come into production again. This is generally going to massively help in preventing such things. Now, your question would be, how is this going to help with that? It's because of this. So when we created that spec, it has now created a .spec file with the feature request or the change request. So it has the exact details of how the design was done for that change request, what were the requirements of that change request. And similarly, if there is any other developer who keeps adding requests or features or changes, this is all going to be recorded now and committed back into the code base, which means that you are going to have this fantastic database of all the details that you have made, all the changes you have made.
Got it. Nice.
So now that we finished requirements and we have generated the design, you have to then go ahead and accept the design if you're happy with how it is implementing it. So it tells you what it's doing. It says what is the service mapping. It gives you an approximate diagram of how it's going to work. This is using Mermaid. It then gives you the CDK application structure. It tells you what is the stack class, what are the constructions it's going to do. It's going to create an S3 bucket. It's going to create CloudFront Route 53 certificate, etc. Any changes that you're not happy with, you can tell it. If you're not happy with changes, you can mention your, I don't want this, I want this, etc. And we'll change it accordingly, your design phase. So you have not only that, you also have all of these additional details which are provided. Deployment errors. If these happen, what happens? Runtime errors, testing strategy, unit tests. So it's going to perform all of these actions, which is very comprehensive. It has covered so many aspects, which sometimes people don't create unit tests or any other such thing. It takes care of all of these different potential gaps. And once it's done all of that, you say move to implementation plan. So what happens in the implementation plan? It creates a task list. A task list is basically based on the requirements and the design. It's going to create steps and actions it needs to perform in order to actually generate your code. So we'll wait for that to get generated this time.
Got it. So this using Kiro, I think it's also helping creating the tickets, everything from start of the requirement to the till the end, the documentation part as well, right? So everything which we are having under one hood, rather than creating it separately, like for the other tools, right? We have to create or given command or something like to create a document separately. I think we are here taking care in the single part that everything will be taken care through
so tickets are not going to be automatically created necessarily.
That I completely.
But even that can potentially work out if you basically create agent hooks at the end of it.
Okay.
So you can leverage your MCP server of Kiro. So here you can see that all these files were generated, right? Now this is my final last phase, which is task list. And here you can click on start task. And once you click on start task, it just starts executing this. It is now execution is queued. It will start executing these tasks. And as it goes through it, it will start creating each of these tasks in order to basically, when I say executing it, it is creating the code for it. So phase one, this is what it's going to create. Phase two is going to then implement stack class and base S3 bucket. Then phase three, it's going to add the code for the CloudFront, so on and so forth.
Okay. So my one question would be, so it is only integrated with AWS, or it will also work with the multi-cloud?
It'll work with multi-cloud.
Multi-cloud, right? So it is something backed by AWS, so that doesn't say that currently it is supported with AWS.
So Amazon, think about it more like an Amazon product, not AWS. So if you think AWS, then you will always think that, hey, is it going to be blocked by AWS? No. Think of it as an Amazon product. An Amazon product such that it can support everything. So VS Code is a good example. VS Code was created by Microsoft. That does not mean it only works with Azure. It worked with everything. So similarly, Kiro, while it's created by Amazon or AWS, it works with everything.
Okay.
So here the task list is getting performed in the background, and sometimes initially since we are still in the preview phase, there are certain limitations of how many requests people have, and potentially things can be slow because they have currently kept it free, which means a lot of people would be using it right now, and all of it is like Claude Sonnet 4.0 or 3.7. So you would have a lot of people using this whole setup right now. And then gradually they're going to convert this into certain pricing models. I'm going to get something similar to Cursor, and then you can go and take it from there and decide which route you want to go with.
Even
So
I
based
hear
on
some,
that, sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
even I heard something that while installing this thing on machine, so it is right now it is somewhere blocking or required a registration, or at least they are confirming whether you are doing it right now or not because of the trending
So
state. Is that?
there's a funny little thing. So this is something which Farooq had mentioned to me, and I was not aware that you could just initially when I went in, I was on the wait list. I did not get into the wait list, but Farooq mentioned to me you can run brew install Kiro and it works. And I tried that and it worked.
Oh,
So I did not have to wait on the wait list, and then I just signed in
got it.
within Google. Today afternoon, I had another friend of mine who was trying to set it up. So they tried to use the Google log. So they did the brew install again. Brew install worked. Kiro got installed. But then when you start Kiro, it asks you to sign in. So when he tried to sign in using Google account, it failed. But when he used the AWS Builder account, it allowed him to log in.
Oh,
So, so I think in that place there is a little bit of preferential treatment. So if you have a AWS Builder ID, you will be able to log in even though you're still waitlisted, and you will still have access to all of this, which is fantastic. This gives you a good chance to look into how spec-driven development is being performed and how Kiro works, which I really love the way it was created. Spec-driven development is a very different way of thinking about vibe coding, which was more uh, vibe coding in its name. Unfortunately, it sounds a bit callous and dangerous. It sounds like you are just going to see how it feels and then go with it without validating any of your code changes. Versus this is giving you a very structured approach.
agreed.
Sorry. So here you can see that the task list is currently queued and it's running. Now let's go into next phase, right? So this is queued. This is going to run whenever it gets bandwidth in the background. Let this run and we can ignore it for now. So we can now go to the next part, which is agent hooks. So here you can see this is specs which is created. Similarly, you can create multiple specs. So you can have all your change requests going in as specs, which is fantastic. Then you have the agent hooks. So what is the agent hook? So agent hook is basically, it listens either for an event. So event can be something like every time I make a change in this folder, something should happen. You should go and update the readme.md with details of what changes are made. So event occurs, prompt is sent to agent, Kiro makes updates. So this is fantastic to update your README files. It's fantastic to update certain other code files. You could potentially, so these are certain phases which are not tested with. but you could potentially use them to update your CI pipelines as well. Every time there is a new folder that is created within this particular .gitlab space, go ahead and then create another deployment for this particular folder. Assume it is a Helm chart or whatever. You would have certain templates which you've used, and perform those deployments. So it could
Got it.
potentially, you could write certain hooks here which would be very, very beneficial. Like, you won't realize it right now, but in the long run it's going to be very beneficial.
Right.
Or even updating documents. So sometimes your readme.md gets ignored, code changes happen, readme.md gets ignored. But now you'd be like, when any code changes happen, ensure that readme is always updated. So this is one of the examples. So I basically created a hook. The hook gets created. It goes into the list of agent hooks that it needs to perform. Okay, so now I have a couple of different things which was scheduled. Okay, changes are happening. You can see task is in progress now. So I was blocked because I had not clicked on reviewed. That's why it blocked me. So now that I clicked on reviewed, it went ahead. So here you can see the task is in progress. And similarly, after it completes this task, it'll go back to the agent hook task, which is also listed now in the task list.
So does it has any predefined or pre-built hooks available so that we can directly use it and
No.
something like that?
So this is a NLP hook, right? Which is a natural language hook. So
Got
the hook listens for an event to occur, such as file creation, file save, file deletion. Prompt is sent to agent based on that event occurring, and then based on that, Kiro will make the update every time you perform that action. So
got
you could basically ensure that you write any such hook that you want. Potentially, gradually, people might actually collate all these different things, and um, Amazon might start providing you certain recommended hooks. But as of now, again, you have to remember this is in preview phase. It's new. These are all recommendations they would be happy to take in, most
it.
probably. And gradually, when we finally see the product evolving, you might see that a lot of these things come inbuilt with certain recommendations. So here you can see that all your code is running, everything is working fine in the background, and it created whatever it had to create, all the files it had to create. So if we go and look here, you can see this is updated. It created a new folder for AWS CDK. It added its own git ignore. It added certain CDK JSON. It created a requirements.txt for Python, readme.md with the details. So it's already performed all the actions that you would want it to perform. And after it completes all of that, it will also create a hook, which we are still waiting for.
Got it.
Yeah. So any questions regarding that?
No, I think I'm pretty good. What all the new things what I have learned, that's something completely different from what I was using with the cursor and everything. So yeah, that's something great to have everything in the under single tool. So that's completely helpful. One question would be with respect to the security thing. Maybe I'm not sure whether they taken care with like if we are handling or we are creating the spec driven, right? But it is not something integrated with anything. So I guess the security concern will be rare, but still anything with respect to that you want to highlight?
I don't think right now there would be any specific security concern regarding these changes,
Hmm.
or how spec-driven development is performed. In fact, if anything, this is a big advantage over most of your other tools. Why? Because it's creating a proper trail and an audit trail to see how a certain feature request or change request will perform. So previously in Cursor, you wouldn't know exactly how someone came up with whatever code design they came up with. You don't know what was the flow. You do not know what was the acceptance criteria. You do not know what were the requirements that were designed. But now you do. You did not have the option of checking any of these details prior to using a tool like this. You could potentially implement it yourself, and potentially that's what users and certain developer teams have done. They would potentially implement their own version of some of these best practices, like steering documents about the product, about the structure, about the tech, certain best practices about similar to the specs. Someone would have created the requirements.md, someone would create the tasks.md. So only because we have this right now, we can see these changes, which prior to this in Cursor, you wouldn't have this option. You could create it, but not every team was. Versus here, it has just become common. Everyone is going to do it this way now.
Understood. Yep, that helps. Thanks.
And last and finally, here you can see an agent hook is created. So every time I make any code changes, it's going to automatically go ahead and ensure it updates the readme.md. So not only is it going to update the readme.md of that, it says update if overall project structure or deployment process changed, and tool specific ones too. So it has
Understood.
added all the instructions which for Kiro agent in a lot more detailed manner than compared to what was the command I mentioned to it. So I
Okay.
mentioned it in the simplest format possible. What it did was it translated that to a more detailed instruction, and then it provides that to Kiro. So developers' lives are very easy. Like this is what I mentioned, and this is what it converted it to, which is very, very handy. You can go and fine tune any of this if you want. Uh, so definitely not a problem, but any changes that you want, you can further fine tune. You can mention if there is a specific file path to watch for. So you can perform all these actions. So for example, you can basically say every time you update start tf files, run terraform plan. So
Hmm.
that can be one of your agent hooks. So it will
Right.
automatically run terraform plan every time you make a code change. And then after you make those code changes, then you can validate at the end, hey, does my terraform plan look fine? Okay, everything looks fine. Or
Right.
helm build. So if I'm making helm chart changes, every time you make changes to any of these files within this helm template folder, ensure to run helm template build with certain dummy variables. And
Right.
you can validate that it works. So
Even
imagine,
we can use the secret scanning and everything like such scenarios also adding into the hooks, right? So that way at least it
uh,
will check whether the secrets are available or not within that thing. So this is one
so
example which I'm thinking on that
I
one.
don't know whether it is at that level where it will appropriately find all your secrets, even if you have made a
Okay.
mistake. So if you don't name it in a conventional manner, it might not realize a secret is a secret or a password is a password. So it wouldn't be something which I would rely on necessarily to catch
Completely
secrets.
on.
But you can definitely say before git commit runs, try and find
Mm-hmm.
any secrets within the repository, and it will always do that. So if I make any code changes before I run git commit, it will always verify the has anyone mistakenly put any secret within this repository, and potentially alert you at the end of it saying that, hey, looks like there is this particular file in this particular location. I wouldn't rely on it necessarily for finding secrets, but definitely could add an agent hook for it.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. So that pretty much walks through my experience of Kiro. And the other part of Kiro is you can use MCP servers like you can use in Cursor VS Code, whether it's Atlassian. So you can see right now my Jira one, I'm not yet authenticated, which is why it's marked as failed. But whether it's Jira, whether it's Linear, I've started recently using Linear, which is kind of a Jira replacement and a simpler to use, to be fair. And yeah, you can basically add all your MCP servers that you want, extend any of them specifically that you prefer to add them, and go crazy with it.
Cool.
That's
Thank,
pretty much it.
thank you, Amit. Thank you. Thanks a lot. This was something I would say it's not an introduction, but it was something more than that, which helps to understand that how the Kiro works and how it has been designed, right? It helps from end to end goal rather than just on developing thing or creating a code, but I think it also handles and take care all the requirements, including developing the code. It also handles the documentation, also pre-checks. Also, we are performing an automated thing the task, even if there is anything added. The hooks will help out to trigger those things, which we just went through that, and setting up the baseline like a steering thing, right? So that also helps that how the uh, complete code or end-to-end documentation to be created for across the team which are working on the same project rather than having
Absolutely.
the different concepts on that map. So I think yeah, that's the reason it is trending right now, and everyone is using it. I think
Absolutely. So as you were saying, right, it's going to be very beneficial for not just developers, not just DevOps engineers, but product owners and team leads and engineering managers as well. So if anybody has any um, questions about how was a specific requirement designed, what was the acceptance criteria, how things were created, they could always go back to this documentation, go and review it, verify it, and come back to us about it. So that is the fantastic part about it. So I hope all of you who joined today really enjoyed the session. I really loved diving through Kiro myself. I was very excited once I started diving into it. Uh, so I hope you all enjoyed it as well. And if you'll have any questions about Kiro, feel free to drop us a message or ping me on LinkedIn, ping us on LinkedIn, and we are happy to try and answer your questions to the best of our ability. And if you all want to hear of any more details of how to use Kiro, etc., we could always try and run a more advanced session sometime in the future to see if there are anything else which people are interested in within Kiro's space. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, couple, for your time here.
thank you all. Thanks for
Thanks,
joining this
everyone.
session. Have a great day. Bye.
Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. Bye bye.